Welcome into the Bite Meat podcast. You guys know I always like to scour the corners of the earth for the great stories and the great pit masters that will bring you some information and some entertainment for you here on the Bite Meat podcast. We appreciate you guys joining us every single week. We appreciate all the great pit masters, some of the biggest names in the game that join us, some of the biggest names in pit making and spices and everything else. And so I stumbled across this, not literally stumbled, I wasn't drinking that much, but I stumbled across this at the Houston World Championship Cookoff, and that is Janice Smella. I hope I pronounced that right, Janice.
You did.
It's Smella
Yep.
from SmellaQue, which is a cool name, by the way, the barbecue team. And in Calgary, from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And lo and behold, Janice was here at the Cookoff, an invitation, I'm guessing, but we'll get those details in just a minute. And walk the stage, man. Walk the stage. I believe in ribs. We'll get all that going as well. Huge accomplishment from the international pit masters that were here. Before we get started with her, let's just remind you that this podcast is brought to you every week by Texas Star Grill Shops. And certainly you can subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast, whether it's iTunes, Spotify. We always recommend that it is Podbean. It would be your first choice because you can get every single podcast that we ever have done here on Bite Meat. On Bite Meat. But I wanted to get you on, and one of the funny things is I reached out to you, Janice, and I'm going to get all the details, but this was kind of funny. I reached out to you and said, hey, can you come on the podcast? Because I thought it was such a cool story as I briefly laid out. And you were like, sure, happy to do it. How did you hear about me? How did you hear about me? It was really cool. First of all, congratulations. I believe 8th place. You tell us about the ribs and where you finished, et cetera.
Yeah. So I finished 8th, which is a huge feat. I think for me personally, just because that's what everybody wants, right? You want to walk the stage, you want a walk. And so that was 8th in ribs. I don't think they were so hot about my chicken. I think it was like 199 or something. Overall, finished 83rd. So not so great on the other meats. But hey, I'm focusing on the fact that I got to walk the stage. So that was amazing.
Amazing. And by the way, 280 something teams. I think it was ended up being 278 teams. I would take 83 and 99 in a heartbeat. But let's get a little background here because your story is truly from the ground up, as I understand it. Literally in Canada, hey, I like barbecue, and people are probably looking at you like, what, et cetera. But we'll get to all that as well. But how did the appearance and the finish at the Houston World Championship Cookoff come about?
I guess we've got to start at the beginning. So, and it starts in Texas. So many years ago, on a maternity leave, I went to Texas. We drove across the U.S. And my husband and I came across the Texas Monthly magazine. It was the first year that they had ranked all of the Texas restaurants. And the top 5 at the time were all within driving distance from where we were staying. So perfect. We were just going to eat ourselves silly. Unfortunately, we ended up getting sick that week, and it was like the unfinished trip. So a couple of years later, my husband and I had a weekend, and we flew down to Houston, and we did eat ourselves silly. We ate all of the top 5. And back then that was like Snow's, Louis Mueller's, Kreitz's, Smitty's. And it was awesome. Great weekend. Probably should have turned vegetarian maybe after that weekend. But the greatest thing is that we flew out of Houston. And at that time, parties like Killen's and Pinkerton's didn't exist. The barbecue was not known, at least in the restaurants in Houston. So we realized that we actually screwed ourselves up because there was nowhere in Canada that we were going to get barbecue like that. We were spoiled. So we ended up going to a few shops that like made pits. And I was like, this is great. We are going to learn how to cook barbecue. We're gonna buy a pit. And sure enough, that's what we did. We bought a pit maker vault. Got to know George, Julio, and we had ourselves a pit shipped to Canada in the middle of winter, because that's like a logical time to get your pit.
Yeah.
And at that time, I think it was one of the first pit makers or first vaults in Canada. And so we really had to learn how to use it by watching YouTube. And my husband said, hey, all of the people that are teaching us how to use this pit are on the competitive circuit. Our hometown, Calgary, has the oldest sanctioned barbecue contest in Canada. Let's enter the contest. So
sure.
That's a bit of a stretch.
How do you make a brisket again?
True. So
yeah.
I had never cooked a brisket. I'd never seen a whole brisket until we entered that contest. But
hold on. Literally, your first brisket was in is it the Roundup? The Calgary competition?
It's called Barbecue on the Bow.
Okay.
It's still running, so that will be Labor Day weekend. We will be at that contest. But that was the first cook-off that we basically registered for. Yeah. And I'd never seen a raw brisket before. So, trimming. And I will say that Canadian briskets are different than American briskets. And so I remember thinking, I was like, this brisket doesn't look like anything that I've seen on YouTube. This is going to be an adventure. And it sure was. So,
and what was the result?
So it turned out that we did a practice contest in Edmonton because that contest started. It was the first time it ran. And so we did that contest and we came, I think we came fourth.
Oh, wow.
Overall, which was miraculous. And third in brisket. Yeah. But the brisket, today, when I look back to that, what we put in the box, we pulled our brisket. Yeah. Which.
Oh, you pulled it.
We pulled it because I didn't really know what to do with it. It was too tender and I didn't know the tips and tricks I know today. Yeah. But that was the story, or that's what started us on the competitive scene. And that's actually what got us cooking.
That's incredible. What a terrific story. And I will say, should have said this a little earlier, now 4-time team of the year in Canada, which is no small feat. I was digging in on that a little bit. There's a lot. It's big now. I mean, there are a lot of competitors in Canada. So that has to be pretty cool. But again, just getting back to how you got to the world, one of the 4 biggest on the planet in the United States anyway, at the Houston Cookoff.
Yeah. So that's, we cooked a lot. So we've been cooking since 2014. That's, I think, 11 years. And along the way, we've been so fortunate. We've learned a lot. And so on the circuit, the first year that we were the Canadian Team of the Year, we got an invite from the Houston Livestock and Rodeo. And to be honest, I didn't even know that there was a cook-off. Not really. But it was an incredible honor. The more I looked at it, the more I was like, wow, this is a really big stage. What a great opportunity. And so we were all in. And so we, the first year we went, I think that was 2018 or 2019. We actually took our trailer, took the Pitmaker vault that we had purchased years ago, and we drove all the way to Houston.
Oh my goodness.
And it was such a sweet moment because I saw George and Julio and the Pitmaker team, and they're like, why did you drive? We have pits here. You could just borrow one. But that's the beauty of the story, is that we started not knowing what we were doing and ended up back in Houston for the Houston Rodeo Cookoff. And it's one of my favorite cookoffs, by far. That's my goal every year.
Do you remember what the impression was when you pulled in that first time? Because it's ridiculous how big it is, and the music and the tents, and they're not even tents, they're buildings.
Yeah. I think I just walked around with the whole weekend with my mouth hanging open. I couldn't believe it. It's honestly second to none. There's nothing like it. It's great. It's what makes it unique. But it's also still shocking. Like I still cannot stop marveling at the hospitality, which is incredible, but just how much effort goes into hosting all of the people that come out to the parties, and just what it's like. The fact that they have to name the call the aisles, they give them street names so that you know where you are. That tells you something.
It's a city.
Yes, it is a city.
Well, clearly, to do that and to fall in love like you did, and to go to the extremes of having a pit shipped to Canada, with customs and everything else, and then drive a trailer from Canada to Houston. I mean, it's pretty obvious you love this. Like, you and your husband absolutely love this. Why do you think that is?
Good question. You know what? We love the people. We love the people on the barbecue circuit. I think you actually had Doug Scheiding on last week.
Yeah.
I met Doug in Montana, of all places. And it was prior to coming to Houston to cook. And he did a demo on how to cook a half chicken. And I was I pulled up a chair and I taped it all. I was I don't know how to cook a half chicken. And I think that we've been friends ever since. And so I think that just tells you a little bit about what the community is like. I definitely could not cook in Texas without the support and the friendships and the equipment that I borrow when I come down. It's really the people that I've gotten to know along the way, and the parties and what everybody else sees at Houston. That's what makes it a unique place to come to and visit and see. I can tell you that Canada does not have anything remotely like that.
I will say, you also mentioned the Texas Monthly, the rankings that come out every year. We had Daniel Vaughn on 3 weeks ago, or a couple of weeks ago, and he's the one that has been doing that. He's got a great story. But when you come down here, let's sort of fast forward to this year. First woman, I believe, to walk the stage in ribs. First Canadian to walk the stage in ribs. Take us through you did your turn-ins. I'm guessing that you turned in every category, or maybe not the Friday night ones, but in every category.
Yep.
And then you wait. And then people may not know this, at these championship cook-offs, especially at the rodeo, they make it a big one here in Houston. There's a parade of when they give you your finalist banner, etc. So take us through that. What you thought. Did you think you had something going? Sometimes you think you killed your chicken, or you killed your brisket, and maybe not so much on the ribs, and then the ribs all of a sudden. How did that all go?
Okay, so I have to actually backtrack, because I had the opportunity to cook the San Antonio rodeo cook-off a month previous.
Yes.
I brought my daughter down. She wanted to be at a major contest. She's 15. She cooks contests against me and my husband on the Canadian circuit, which is a massive feat. I'm so proud of her. And so she said she wanted to come to a major contest. And I was like, San Antonio is a good one for her to go to because she's underage. And because she came, I was like, well, you can't stand around. I'm going to put you to work. So she doesn't have the experience of cooking half chickens. And brisket is what Texans are most proud of, I think, overall. So I was like, you get ribs. So she actually cooked the ribs for that cook-off, and we got a call, third place.
Oh, wow.
And so the funny thing coming into Houston was everybody was asking me, oh, did you bring your daughter?
We need those ribs.
That's right. And so I ended up cooking Houston by myself. I often cook, or it's not uncommon for me to cook solo. But I'm nervous, but I'm excited. I love the contest. I've cooked, this was my 5th year cooking at the Houston Rodeo Cookoff. And all of my turn-ins were great. I did the turn-ins for Friday. I was like so happy with all of my meats.
Mm-hmm.
I did a practice for ribs and chicken on the Friday as well. I loved my ribs on Friday, didn't love them so much on Saturday.
Oh, really?
But yeah, and I've not had a call before in Houston. And so I've seen I call it the finalist parade, when they bring the finalist cards and the banners around, and the excitement. And I truthfully prepared myself to be not getting a call at all.
Yeah.
And so one finalist card came into the International Village because we're fenced off, and it went to Mexico. And so I was super excited for them. And then I look over, and at the gate, there's 3 more cards. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And they marched those cards into the back corner where Australia was. And I was like, phenomenal. 3 cards for Australia. I was like, clearly they won the contest.
Yeah.
But like, amazing that Australia got 3 cards. And so I was like, okay, like I prepared myself. Nothing's happening. And I turned around, and I was getting some help from Guillermo, who usually hangs out with the Mexican team, but he was giving me a hand for the weekend. And he's like, I think they're coming over. And I was like, no, they're not. I see 3 cards in Australia. And he's like, no, I think it's happening. And I was like, no, I don't think so. So I had turned around. And the next thing I know, he's like, it's yours. It's like, it's here. So I think from that moment on, I was basically in shock. But it's honestly for sure, it's the most sweet reward of like a long barbecue career that has been like truly blessed for us.
That's just absolutely incredible. Again, with all the accomplishments for yourself, I am curious. How'd you get your team together if you came down by yourself?
So I borrow equipment. There's so many people that I can thank. I had cookers. I typically use Gateway drums. I had meat brought in for me. Houston Rodeo provides a Yeti cooler. And then I store my gear with friends along the way. And so, like I said, I really could not compete in the US without the help of others, because I really I fly over, I rock star it, I go to the HEB, I pick up a few things, and then I just cook the contest.
Yeah. HEB, good old fashioned HEB pickup. And so then you know your ribs, because I'm guessing on the card it says what you're finalist in, and so your ribs are there. Then it gets pretty exciting, because you're rubbing elbows with all your friends, and maybe some people you didn't know, they're somewhat idols or whatever. What was that like once you get into the finalist area?
So that's the part that like I'd obviously never seen before. It was super exciting. I think one thing that's interesting, so it was a great day for international overall. Mexico had a rib call, Australia had a rib call, and then Great Britain had a call in brisket. So there's like 4 international teams in the area. There's a few people that I know backstage. So Grant Pickerton was there, and I was excited to see him. But I was also amazed at how many of the people that I've seen through the years, like on the Houston Rodeo Committee, that were backstage. I didn't realize, honestly, how much of a part they had as like part of like organizing the whole thing. And I think that's also the most incredible aspect of the Cookoff, is like how many people volunteer to support this organization that goes into supporting kids and scholarships in the agricultural community. Like that's such a win. And so I think I was like awestruck the entire time. I was like, and I texted my husband. I was trying to make sure that I told him about what was happening.
Yeah.
Because he usually comes down with me. He didn't come on this trip, but he was super excited. And so I was just trying to take it all in.
Yeah. Well, it like I said, just an incredible story. But I think the funny, interesting, not funny, interesting part to me is that this all happened in the span of 11 years, man. I mean, I know you realize this. That's incredibly fast to get to the highest level and to walk the stage. So I did a little more digging, and you actually went. Actually, you can see the logo right there. My alma mater. You went to, was it called Brisket Academy, or what was it in 2017 that you actually went and tried to I think it was called something like that. Do you remember that trip to College Station? I think it's called Camp Brisket. Here it
Camp
is.
Brisket.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Why? What was that all about?
Oh, I in general, like, I love food. I love the science of food, and I think there's so much more to learn about why there's a smoke ring, why there isn't a smoke ring, what makes Canadian meat different than American meat, how are the grading systems different. So I had the opportunity to go visit Camp Brisket with Texas A&M with a friend, and I just wanted to learn more. And so it was really eye-opening in terms of, like, I've been cooking for quite a few years by then. So I felt really comfortable in terms of, like, I feel comfortable trimming a brisket and those pieces, but it was really fascinating just to know, like, what goes behind, like, the grading system. And one of the things that I have less experience with is that they bring in pit masters from all over Texas, and they have these giant pits. And so to have, like, a 500-gallon, like, offset smoker there, or 1,000-gallon smoker, like, I can't imagine cooking on something like that. And that was the most fascinating thing for me, of, like, it's different, obviously, running something so big compared to the little but not little. Like, I have a Yoder Wichita at home, which I think is super fun to run, but it runs differently in different humidities and at sea level. And so I was just fascinated to learn, to see brisket in a different capacity with different cooks.
Yeah. What about the fascination with Texas barbecue? It seems like you do have one.
I really love Texas. I think it's maybe because our story started there. I love the food. I love the simplicity of, like, Texans have this thing. They're just, like, very carefree. They're like, it's just barbecue. It's a part of your lifestyle. It's a part of your culture. It's part of what people do. Unfortunately, that's not the same way in Canada. Canada does not have a barbecue culture. If you say barbecue in Canada, people think you mean a propane grill.
Yeah.
And so if I say that I cook on charcoal, or, like, I have a live fire, they really don't know what that means. Like, live fire means, like, is your, like, and I cook it in a drum. They're like, so you have a trash can that you set on fire? Like,
kind of.
kind of,
Yeah.
It's a contained, controlled fire.
Yeah.
So I think that appreciation for barbecue is there. And I love that, like, I think I fit in. Everyone is so welcoming. I love trying different places in Texas, and I've made a lot of really great friends. And so I'm just so grateful for the opportunity whenever I get down there.
When did you know? I want to get into a couple of your technique. We always try to share some techniques and some thoughts and ideas on how to cook specific things. And go figure, I think I'm going to go with ribs today with you. But anyway, when did you know as a competitor, because you had this passion, you made the commitment. We talked about that. You started cooking. When did you know, what? I'm pretty good at this. How did that come about?
You know what? I think I'm good, but I always think that there's more to learn. I don't think,
everybody does. I can make a brisket today, and then right before I unwrap it, I'm still just a little anxious, even though I know what I'm doing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know that there's, like, ever a moment. Doug Scheiding gives me such a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
He's always like, "You're a champion." And I'm just like, I can't actually use that word. I find it really, really hard. Especially because, like I said, barbecue culture is not within Canada. So I am quite honestly, I'm super humbled for every opportunity to, especially to cook in the US amongst so many great cooks. And I just want to hang out with everybody. I want to be with everyone. I want to be on the same level. And I am just grateful just to be there.
But there was a moment. Was there a competition? Was there a particular time when you realized, okay, we all have those apprehensions, as we just talked about, where you go, you know what, I am going to continue to do this. This is going to be, part of my life or my life.
I don't know. I don't look at it that way. Every season I think about which cook-off do I want to go to? Where are my friends at? Am I having fun? And sometimes I choose not to go to some cook-offs, which I know some organizers are not thrilled with me. But I also think that I think I'm chasing friendship more than I'm chasing an achievement.
Well, that's common. That's common in this world. You can talk. I was hanging out, and if you come down next year, I'll be sure to come down and hang out with you guys and do the podcast live as I did last week with Tyler Gurney, and you mentioned Doug Scheiding and Ronnie Killen and Abel Nuncio, who've been there forever with Big Bertha. Every one of them, without fail. The competitions really, they're fun, but they're not as much fun as the camaraderie. I mean, I'm guessing you fall in that exact same place.
Yeah, that's 100% where it is. Yeah.
So, before we get to the ribs, when you're turning in and you're learning how to, I'm talking about earlier in your career, learning how to do turn-ins and what it should look like and all that. How much of that has been self-taught or just YouTube or competitions or experience? How did that? Because it's a science. It's a science. You talk about that. I'm guessing you have some science in your background to get it just right.
I would say any information available, I for sure would seek it. And then really a lot of it has been trial and error. We used to, my husband Russell and I, we used to say that people would say, "Oh, you must practice a lot." And I was like, no, we practice at competition. There has been so many times, especially we had the capacity on a vault where we could run extra racks of ribs. There was a time when so I was convinced that we could cook hot and fast. And Russell said, "No, I think we're cooking low and slow." And we only cooked on one pit. And so we couldn't agree.
Couldn't do both.
We couldn't do both.
Yeah.
And so what we ended up doing was we took our drums onto the circuit and we would cook against each other within our tent. So we spent an entire year cooking against each other. And what was amazing was, we would cook, for example, we would do one set of meats on the vault because it had the capacity. And then I would do ribs or pork on the drum. And then what we found was that we couldn't remember which meats were going into the box.
Oh, yeah.
We were winning on both. And so at the end of that very expensive grocery bill year, we found it didn't matter whether or not we were taking the vault out or we were taking the drums out. And we a pit maker vault, it's pretty heavy. It's 1,000 pounds. You can't see me, but I'm 5 feet, period. People are like, "How do you move your pit around?" And I'm like, a little muscle here, right? But secretly, I have a Tommy gate on the back of the pickup.
There we go. Go. That's what we're talking about. Which transitions perfectly to the ribs, because every year when there's contest winners or whomever, people always ask the common question. They just don't have the means to do it, and I do. How'd you do your ribs?
In terms of
these that you walk the stage with.
oh, so the great thing is I had a good friend, Bobby Delgado. He picked up the ribs for me.
Mm-hmm.
He's picked up meat for me before. I was like, whatever you would cook with, he's also a competition cook. I will take whatever you bring.
Sure.
So it was great. I seasoned them, salt and pepper, a few others like sweeter rubs,
Mm-hmm.
wrap them. And the real trick is, this is more of a trick, I think, for Canadians, is like, I don't think people understand how far you can take your ribs, but keep them tender.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a little bit different for me because I'm used to cooking in colder climates.
Sure.
Of like, it was hot. I think that day was about 81 degrees Fahrenheit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't cook in temperatures like that. Like, that is a very, very nice summer day in Calgary.
Yeah.
So, like, knowing how to run a Cambro. So I did rest them, and I did put them into the Cambro so that they could vent. Probably doesn't need to happen in Texas. I'm not sure, but out of habit, because I do that in Canada, I just stuck them into the Cambro. But it's really about, seasoning your meat and cooking it to tenderness.
Yeah. Well, it was a common theme that I was getting from a lot of the pitmasters that I was speaking with. It was also very high humidity one day and then lower humidity the next, which I don't think you necessarily do a lot in Canada either. So the cooks, the times you had to be on your toes to change, like, oh, well, we need to raise this or lower this or whatever. So there was a challenge there. It seemed like, you would think colder weather, like a couple of years ago when it was cold and wet, you might feel a little more comfortable. But this one was even more challenging when it looked like bluebird skies. It was also windy,
Yep.
So those were all factors that I'm guessing you had to really play with.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I notice about Gateway drums is that it's easy. It's one unit, and it's one pit. So in terms of like what I do on the one pit for the one meat doesn't affect the other meats that I'm cooking at the same time. And so I have my schedule built out pretty well in that, like, I ended up resting the ribs maybe for 45 minutes, and normally I would rest them for an hour. So you're right. Whatever the temperatures were doing that day, like, the ribs needed a little more time, and so I just ran them longer. But those are like, that's experience talking in terms of, like, I said before, we'd practice at competition.
Yeah.
So, like, getting that feel for, like, hey, these ribs need to keep cooking, that's great. And all I use, fortunately or unfortunately, is I just use like a very expensive probe. I use a Thermapen probe, and I don't know what temperature I run the ribs to. I can feel when they're ready.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, congratulations again. I really wanted to get you on, because all the accomplishments and the great story. I mean, truly, you can, and I'm sure this is a message that you have for a lot of people that come up to you, like someone who is an absolute novice listening to this podcast that knows nothing about nothing. I'm not saying they can, walk the stage at the World Championship, but they can get really good at this. I mean, you are the example. I'm sure you get that a lot, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so true. Like, I think if you put enough effort into something, you'll come far. Like, we invested in really, like, it was an interest. It was because I was hungry that we traveled and cooked and ate so much barbecue. But, like, I cook at home a lot, and every opportunity I do practice, or I try something new. And so I think that, like, that interest, anyone can do it. You just need to get out there and give it a try, really.
Well, it's SmellaQue, which, again, that's a cool name. Where can people find you? And maybe, I don't know how much you have of a presence on YouTube, et cetera, but who want to find out a little bit more, some of the things that you can teach and they can learn.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I'm on Instagram, Janice_SmellaQue, QUE. My last name is Smella. That's real. So we had to do something with it when we decided to compete. And I have a website, SmellaQue.com. You can see some of the crazy things that I've like experimented with. I got really bored during COVID, so I just played with cooking things that didn't go together, chocolate and cauliflower.
Okay, you might not have me on that one.
Fair. But, like, I don't mind trying something new too. So I'll cook octopus or offal or something different just because I can, because I'm interested. But I also have like standard tips and tricks on like how to cook ribs, how to cook a brisket, just some things that like the average Joe would want to know too.
Awesome. Any competitions coming up?
Yeah, I'm going to cook in Canada. There's a few cook-offs, and then I'm thinking about going down to Montana for a few cook-offs this year. And then I'm actually headed out to Nova Scotia, which is a province in Canada on the East Coast. And I think I might be running a class there. So,
nice.
Yeah, it'll be a great day.
Well, I really appreciate you joining us. And obviously, we're all going to keep up with what you're doing, and you got to come back down. So I'll be sure to pop into your tent, and we can get some videos and some more information from you.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, that is Janice Smella. This is the Bite Meat Podcast, and coming up next is the Smoking Hot Tip of the Week with our friends over at Texas Star Grill Shop.